Hello, this is Renato from ContentWise, and today we'll talk about how we perceive personalization at ContentWise. First of all, let's start from the company vision, which actually helps you understand why we do sort of things. So what we do at ContentWise is we help media and B2C brands deliver rich, bespoke, and smart digital customer experiences at every touch point. You can see, for example, that we work with some of the major operators and players in the streaming and media space. Let's get to it though. What I would like to show you today is the concept that we call the 4 levels of personalization at ContentWise. At ContentWise, we started with a simple concept, the idea of recommendations. More than 15 years ago, we started with the concept of being able to personalize a list of items for a user. We call this the single list approach. Whether you're actually looking at the forward perspective, a user actually searching for something and providing back personalized search responses, or whether you're looking at the lean backward perspective where a user is looking at the discovery problem and is trying to search something. And first evolution that we apply to our software solution offering is the ability to actually personalize the experience from a discovery navigational point of view. So one of the capabilities that we'll look at today is the ability to go into 2 dimensions at this point, the horizontal and the vertical point of view, with what we call the dynamic collections. While we were at it, we thought, well, why can't we actually enhance the user personalization even more? So we introduced the concept of list of list page personalization. So the ability for UX Engine, our flagship product, to change the user experience fundamentally, even at an additional level from a personalization point of view. This, for example, allows you to do AI optimized rate selection and ordering, but also to do a targeted user experience. The last level of personalization is what we call the presentation layer. What if we could actually change the way that things are displayed to a user according to the user preferences, behavior, and consumption habits? This is what we call the presentation layer. Without further ado, let's take a look at what ContentWise is with a brief demo and actually an overview of what UX Engine is. First of all, let's start from a couple of house cleaning information. So I'm going to show you 2 different interfaces. On one side, we have a light background set of pages, which you see on the right part of my screen. This is what we call the UX Engine Administration Portal. This is where you as an operator can go in and control what the user experience is through the UX experience design, or what are the business rules applicable and applied to your personalization recipes. You can also control data management, service model, and depending on your level of access and your role, you might see some of these functionalities or not. For example, right now I'm logged in as an admin, so I also see the administration point of view. On the left side of the screen, you can see actually a dark set of background pages. This is what we call the UX Engine Simulator. The UX Engine Simulator is a place where you can actually control the user experience from a preview perspective. So what you can do is, for example, you can preview what the experience is as a user. In this case, I'm connected user Emma. Or you can actually test the user experience with different users, different user profile, whether these are real, whether these are user personas, and you can get to see how things happen. So for example, if I want to take a look at the landing page of this service, which we call the ContentWise demo service, we can actually look at the landing page. So let's look for the landing page here. Landing page on demand service, and we can see how the structure of this page, upcoming movies, hero banner, is representing the page structure itself. We'll get to how to design and manage the layout of the page itself. Let's start from the first level of personalization, the single list approach. In order for me to explain you what is personalized, what I'm going to do, I am going to actually compare 2 different users. So let me do a side-by-side comparison of the user experience between 2 different users. Let me get myself out of the way. So on one side, we're going to use user Jack. And on one side, we're going to use user Emma. As soon as we start landing on the system, we can start already seeing that things are different. You might notice that the first carousel that we see after the hero banner is what we call the recommended for you, the very traditional approach of recommendation engine, where we see top movies for Emma, top movies for Jack, and the way that this content is selected is what you would expect out of a recommendation engine. So we're selecting the best content for Emma and the best content for Jack. You might also notice, by the way, that the hero banner by now has been revolving, and you have seen very different content for the 2 users. That's also an application of what we call the algotorial point of view, where we're taking an editorial list and we're actually applying a re-ranking of those results according to the user profile. What does user profile mean? So if we take a look at the way that UX Engine understands the user profile, if we go into the user preference here, which is yet again another tool that you have available in the UX preview portal, we can actually check how UX Engine understands a user profile. And in this page, there are actually two of the signals that we use to understand a user profile. We can see what we call implicit preferences and what we call explicit preferences. So the implicit preferences are a way for UX Engine to infer from the user behavior what is the implicit user preferences in terms of features of content. We can see directors, cast, themes, mood, genre, setting, all of the metadata fields that describe the content nature, the content features. We imply, based on the user behavior, that user Emma, for example, she likes a lot of transformation, discovery. She likes romantic, musing, charming content. She likes setting, falling in love, drama, adventure. So knowing this, going back to On Demand, the landing page that we have, you can now see why Top Movies for Emma contains a lot of that content. While if we look at user Jack, we can see that, for example, Jack has a lot of mystery, pursuit, discovery, suspenseful, thrilling, New York City, action content, a lot of thriller. So very different type of preferences that user Jack express in the way that we call implicit, which is through consumption of content. So the implicit set of preferences that we see here are based on user behavior. Any action that the user performs into the system, like it could be a watch event, that's the simplest kind of event that we can consider, or whether it's a click, whether it's an add to list, it's a record, buy, we can track any type of action that is performed in the user experience, and we can use that to imply that the user might like certain features of content or might like certain content. The other set of information that you see here down below is what we call explicit. Explicit information is something that we ask the user to provide as an explicit information. That information can be positive or negative. For example, user Jack can suggest that, hey, I don't really like playful content. So it can actually tell you explicitly what features the user like or does not like. In this way, you can actually collect information in a much more granular way. If we go back now to our on-demand page, we can check and compare that Top Movies for Jack is very different from Top Movies for Emma. And we can also get an explanation from the system itself on why certain recommendations are being made. So for example, if we check why Safe Haven is being recommended for Emma, we can see that Emma liked this kind of content. By the way, they both watch Law and Order. But the other titles that are displayed here for Emma are very different from the titles that are actually recommended to Jack. And indeed, we can see what are the items that have generated such a recommendation for the specific slot that we checked, and also the features that have influenced this recommendation being represented in slot number 1 for Jack and for Emma. So we can see some of the features that we talked about earlier. If we are to represent this kind of point of view in a chart, I always like to go back to this workflow where we can think of 4 types of signals that we use to personalize any behavior of the user experience. We can think of implicit information or explicit information. Implicit is what the user does, implies a certain rating on items or features. If you watch a lot of content with Tom Cruise, I'm going to imply you like Tom Cruise. If you watch a lot of episodes from The Simpsons, I'm going to imply that you like The Simpsons. Explicit information are thumbs up, thumbs down, anything the user tells you directly, whether it's a positive feedback or a negative feedback. And it could be a rating, like I did not like this movie, or it can be a feature, like for example, I love action comedy. In this way, with these 4 types of signals, we can build a user profile, which is then used in real time to perform back recommendations to the user and to present list of recommended items or to change the user experience. Now that we've taken a look at the first level of recommendation from a discovery point of view. So we're just browsing our system, we're looking through it, and we're seeing how responses are different for the two users. Let's now take a look at a different point of view from a personalized search. So if we search for something, let's say that we search for Tom as user Jack, and we use what we call the standard relevance-based search, we might see a lot of content with Tom Cruise. That's because Tom Cruise is a very relevant search result and search term in our system. So if we perform the standard search based on relevance, this is what we actually see. But the system knows that user Jack has a very specific preference on one actor, which is Tom Hanks. So if we switch to personalized search, now we see that the results based on Tom Hanks are being prioritized compared to the results being shown for Tom Cruise. So this is what we call the personalized search point of view, which is another way that we actually use the 4 signals that we saw earlier to personalize back the search results for the user itself. Now, let's go back to our diagram here and let's start talking about the second level of personalization, the multiple list. This concept is best explained through a page right here in my laboratory, which we call collections. What are collections? Collections are a way to group content which is specified by a specific category. Like for example, here you can see 2000 suspenseful and thrilling movies shot in New York City. 1990s, 2000 movies shot in Los Angeles. 2000 frenetic movies. And if we look at the same page, our laboratory collection page for user Emma, we're going to see very different categories. This is the concept that we call dynamic layout. So what we do is we group objects according to certain features. Like in this case, it could be the mood, the setting, the category, the main actor. It could be the genre. It could be any metadata features that we have available. And we use these metadata features to, first of all, create collections, and second, to assign these collections to different users. The way this works is that through the UX Builder, you can see that we have different type of use cases. In this case, the dynamic layouts are represented right here. And as far as goes as dynamic categories, we see here there are about 2,500 dynamic layouts. Why are they called dynamic? Dynamic because these are actually being created by the system UX engine itself. So if we look at the configuration of this specific dynamic layouts, we can see that we're using the metadata fields for setting, time, mood, and show type. And what the system does, it creates thousands of different collections. These collections are there sent to your curation point of view. So you can actually go in and you can evaluate. You can, for example, you can tell the system that this is a valid category. Yes, I would like this category to be displayed. Or, for example, null, which is metadata issues happen, so null is a value that we have in our metadata field, so we're going to exclude that. We're not going to display it. So you actually have full control over these categories, and you can go in and you can approve them, or you can exclude them, or you can manually change these titles. Let's say, for example, that 2000 museum movies shot in Los Angeles, New York City is way too long. You can actually change this, and you can actually go back and modify its title. So these dynamic collections are useful to not only personalize the user experience, but to understand better what are users as clusters watching. So for example, you might not even have realized that 2000 frenetic movies was a category that users were actually watching. So this concept of two-dimensional point of view allows your users to receive personalized categories. Now, the categories you see here are extremely complicated, and they are extremely complicated for a reason. The reason is that you remember these categories in the future. But in reality, what we usually recommend doing is creating categories that are, for example, only the genre itself. It could be, for myself, it could be science fiction. For another person, it could be action. So you can use these dynamic categories to select part of the user interface, for example, select carousels, and allow the system to automatically select the best category to be shown for that specific user. The structure of this page is the same for every user, but it shows up differently. So if we check, for example, the configuration of this page, we are now in UX design, UX builder pages. We actually go into laboratory number 8, feature dynamic layouts. The way I build this page, I simply tell the system, I would like to use the first category of the dynamic stream multilanguage, then the second one, then the third one, then the fourth one. So what I'm doing here, I'm simply suggesting pick the first favorite category for the user, the second, the third, and fourth, and fill it up with whatever makes sense for this specific user. And as you can see, the categories are very different. Within the categories themselves, the actual content is also recommended. So you can start seeing here 2 levels of personalization being applied. The first one is the list itself of the categories is personalized. And the second is the content within one category is also personalized. Let's take a look now at the third level of personalization, what we call the page personalization perspective. Now that we've seen that we can go further beyond the concept of personalizing a list of items, the traditional recommended for you approach, we can see that we can actually personalize user experience on multiple levels. Let's take a look at what we mean by page personalization. Now, if we go back to our on-demand page and we check the structure of this page as intended by the editor, so we go to UX Builder, Pages, we find the landing page on demand right here. We take a look at the configuration of the landing page. We see that we have hero banner at the top. Then we have a continue watching, which we don't see here. Then we have a because you like. Then we have top movies for you, top TV shows for you, dynamic layout number 1, dynamic layout number 2, recently released popular content for you. If we want to take a look at a high-level overview, this is how actually the page looks like in general. So if we scroll the page, each carousel that you see here on the right will be represented in the page itself. This is what we call the layout manager, the ability to control what rails, what carousels are displayed for a user. You might notice that the color of these rails is differentiated. So we have some of them that are yellow, some that are gray, some that are slightly blue. The color coding here allows you to understand that the gray ones are always in the same location. So the upcoming movies, which is the hero banner, is always going to be there. In the same way, the staff fix for you is always at the bottom of the page. So these are what we call the pin locations. So those carousels are always going to be in a static location. Yellow ones are optional. Light blue ones are movable but mandatory, meaning that they have to be there. Here you see the options that you can select. Movable but optional, that's yellow. Movable but mandatory, meaning that that carousel has to show up in the page, but it doesn't have to be in the same position for everyone. So what happens here is that indeed we are going to see a different page not only in terms of what categories are displayed and what content is displayed, but also the order of these categories is personalized for the user. Hero banner is in the same location for these 2 users. We have top movies for Emma, for Jack, in the same location. Then we have because you X, which was in a static location. So for example, user Jack recently watched Sally Miracle in Jackson, so he's getting those results, while user Emma watched Because You Like Crazy Rich Asians, so it's getting different set of results. And then you start seeing, for example, dynamic collections, top TV shows, top rated movies, while another dynamic collection is displayed for user Jack. So the more you go down in the page, you might see that some of the carousels are in the same position, but some are in a different position. So now we see continue watching, which for the default user should have been at the top of the page. But since user Jack doesn't interact very often with continue watching, the system has automatically pushed down this rail, even to the point that it might not be displayed for a user. Now we see superpowers, and superpowers is actually not displayed for Jack. Now we see a promotion. Then we see the same carousel. So you can see how the carousels in each page have moved around according to what the user likes in terms of type of content that is displayed in each carousel, where the user has clicked, and the pattern of behavior. So the whole idea is, if I never click on continue watching, why should continue watching be at the top of the page? Or if I always go to documentaries, because I'm a huge lover of documentaries, and I always go to the bottom of the page to find it, why can't we actually move documentaries to a better location? So here you see that we can combine the concept of personalizing categories to the concept of reordering them in the page, not only through categories, but also through the way that users search for content. For example, I might get to the same content, let's say Titanic. I'm a huge fan of Titanic and I want to watch it. Am I going to watch it because it's displayed in the hero banner, because it's displayed in the top movies for a user, the recommendation list, or is it going to be something that I watch because it's a top rated? So even depending on the same type of content, the way I get to content matters. Do I watch it because I click on a widget here that has vertical posters or one that has horizontal posters? Do I click on a poster that is representing popular content, recent content, recommended by editors? So this concept of page personalization allows you to reorder pages so that the carousels that make more sense both from a content but also consumption habit display back to the users. The way we control this is indeed through what we call the positioning, where we can use fixed, movable, mandatory, and we can play with our pages, we can rearrange them. So the starting point of view is what we define. The more the user uses the system, the more the UX engine knows about the user itself, the more this carousels will move in the page up and down or totally disappear depending on the user behavior. So for example, you can see that in both of them, top rated movies was actually pretty much high above. That means that both users, Jack and Emma, have often chosen content from the top rated movies carousel, so it has bubbled up. The whole idea of page personalization is to make sure that users can find content quicker. The last perspective is what we call the presentation layer: personalized imagery, widgets, dynamic titles. So once we understand that we can personalize single list, list of lists, the order of lists, the next level will be, what if we can actually personalize how information is displayed back to the user? I already anticipated a second ago that you can see here that there is a carousel with vertical posters, one with horizontal posters. What we want to do is we want to programmatically change the way information is presented back to the user in a way which might be personalized or it might be targeted. For example, here you can see that I can manually decide what type of widget can be used. So for example, if we pick top movies for you, we can see that we can choose vertical, horizontal, we can choose whether the item title is displayed, why there's a logo display up to it, whether the user can move around, or if I change the carousel, for example, if I select the widget hero banner, I have different properties. So we call this the ability for UX Engine to instruct the UI layer on how information should be presented, because we want to make this programmatic. Why do we want to make this programmatic? We want to get to a place that looks like this, where information is displayed into different users in different way. Now I'm switching to a different service that it's available within this multi-tenant system. It's called the Grayson service, because we're using one feature that is available to Grayson, which is called personalized imagery. So for example, if I now select user Emma and user Jack, I'm actually not only receiving personalized recommendations for each user in a different way, but I am also going to receive a poster for each content that is different. For example, let's compare the generic catalog that we see here at the top. This is a fixed set of items that we have editorially chosen. We have Batman, Beast, Gravity, Fast and Furious. The first carousel for both users uses the standard images. The second carousel uses images that are personalized for Emma and personalized for Jack. So you can see, for example, that the poster for the Batman is different, the one for the Beast is different, the one for Gravity is the same, but it's not the standard one. If we now see that we can personalize not only the content, as we have here, so personalized content for Jack, same user profile Jack, a lot of action, a lot of thriller. Personalized items for Emma, a lot of comedy, a lot of romance. Why do we get Coyote Ugly here? Well, actually there is some romance in there. And if you start personalizing the way that information is presented, so we personalize the poster, we can see actually that the image chosen to show Coyote Ugly is very different. So if we start having personalized content with personalized imagery, you can see how much the content displayed is not only personal for the user, but it's also personalized in the way that is being displayed. When we talk about displaying, you might have noticed earlier that there were some badges around content. So for example, if we go to user Jack here, we might see that there's an award label here. We call it a ribbon or a badge. There's a try this here, another award here. There are different type of badges. So talking about presentation layer, I need to introduce the concept of what we call business rules. Business rules are a way to change results of the personalization process according to your business rules. The simplest rule, which doesn't actually change the content, but it simply applies a badge, is what we call the badging rule, right here. Badge rules allow to apply a badge. For example, try this. Try this means this user has not interacted with this content. For example, we have TV shows here, and user Jack has not watched The Shooter yet. So since it's a new show for user Jack, we're going to add a label that say, try this. You never watched this TV show. What we saw earlier, the Law and Order is a frequent series for Jack, so that's not going to receive the try this. But Law and Order also receive an award, so we see the award label being used there. The premium option for actually using badges is to do something like upselling. For example, if we go to user Emma, which has a lot less entitlements from a content perspective, and we take a look at her page, we might see sooner or later we find some content that has the premium label. And we found one right here, Red Sparrow, The Accountant, The Mag. All of these items are what we call an upsell opportunity for user Emma. So what we're doing here, we are tagging content instead of removing content which the user doesn't have entitlement to or presenting in a dedicated carousel. We're mixing content that the user does not have entitlement to. And we're actually suggesting to the user, hey, this content is premium, so you should pay for it. So this is another example of what we call a badge rule. Now, there are 5 rules that are available. We have filter rules. Filter rules allow you to include or exclude content. So for example, we could decide to apply packages and to remove content that the user does not have entitlement to, or we could decide to only show user content that they're not entitled to. So filtering allows you to include or exclude certain type of content. For example, a very simple example of an actual rule is do not show all movies, do not display anime, do not show TV shows. So we can decide what type of content is actually being displayed in a carousel. And you can see here on which carousels these rules are applied. These rules can also be scheduled, so you can decide, for example, that let's now move to the push rules, where I have an example of a rule which is being pushed at 10 a.m. Now, it makes no sense that we push James Bond content, so this is a totally made up example, again, so that you're reminded. The idea is James Bond content is being pushed at 10 a.m. So what we have here is we have the ability to schedule that certain rules are being enabled and active at a certain point in time. So this push rule is a way for you to add content to an existing carousel. An example is represented here. Let's use user Emma, which has a little bit more variety in this case. What is intelligent push? Intelligent push is the ability to change the content of a result set, in this case a recommendation, and include something that we want to make sure that it's going to be displayed to the user. So in this case, we have a list of recommendations for user Emma. In the second carousel here, we have a set of editorial recommendations, items that we want to add to the carousel recommended for you to Emma. So the first option will be, well, we just pick one out of them, the first one in this case. But a much more intelligent push will be, what if we actually ask UX Engine to select the best content out of my editorial list here to be displayed to user Emma? So in this case, out of all of these items, the one that has a profile that fits user Emma is Iron Man 3. So at this point, I'm not pushing a generic item out of my editorial list, but I'm actually pushing an item that makes sense for user Emma. And the way this works is we are actually targeting the user according to the user profile itself. That's why we call it intelligent push. Other type of rules are, for example, update. Update are the ability to move up or move down certain content. So for example, if we have recent content, recent meaning being released in 2023 or 2022, we can move it up, meaning that we can put it in a better location. Like for example, up at the beginning of the carousel versus the end. Or we could actually lower the priority, so we can demote content. So update works in both ways. You can move up or move down content that exists in a carousel. You can use this, for example, if I have older movies in my carousel, even if they're recommended for this user, deprioritize them. Or if I have content from a certain provider, I want to put it in a better location, better meaning at the beginning of the carousel. So update will change your carousel in a way that you can actually update, you can actually increase or decrease the ranking of specific items. Balance rules are used to make sure that your carousels include a certain amount of content or do not have a certain amount of content. And for example, you can see it here that we have balanced show type. So balanced show type says require the result list to contain no more than 50% of the items that have the same show type. Show type in our case means an episode of a TV show versus a movie versus news, other type of categories of shows. That's why show type. So these rules make sure that even if a user is very much in a bubble, we can actually contain that bubble and make sure that we'll limit the amount of content that this user is actually usually attracted to so that we show something else. It allows us to control the user bubble. The other option would be make sure that at least a certain amount of content. For example, here we see two rules. One that says enforce premium content 20%. What we're doing here, make sure that 20% of our carousel includes content that is premium for the user, because we want to try to push some content that the user might want to actually transact with. And in this case, you can see that we have 20%, 50%. This is an example where we are actually running an A/B test between the two rules and seeing which one performs better from a user experience perspective, from a conversion point of view, from a financial perspective. So we can actually compare these rules and see what happens one compared to the other. Now, going back to our concept of discovery, lean forward, lean backward, I wanted to show you a couple of things that are related to search. So for example, first of all is, yes, obviously we have the concept that you can actually start typing and we have autocomplete. So you can actually see that we have suggestions here done based on Tom. We also have trending searches, whether they are on live TV, on demand. But I would like to show you this. What if I search for content like gravity, where I'm not seeing any auto results here, and I do know that gravity is not available in this system. Well, I know it already, so I'm searching for it in any case. So this is an example of what we call shadow search. So the ability for UX Engine to, hey, I know you're looking for gravity, but we don't have it. These are titles that are very close to it. So this concept of shadow catalog allows you to make sure that if a user is searching for some titles specifically and they don't find it, you don't tell them, sorry, I don't have it, can help you. But sorry, I don't have you, but here is something else. So the idea is to keep users engaged into your system so that they can actually find something that might be related to the content that they were looking for. Another example is what we call semantic search. So all of the examples that you saw so far are related to the ability to search by term. What if you can actually do something a little bit more complicated? Show me movies about the Red Planet. So this is much more of what we will call a natural language query. So semantic search allows your users to perform queries that are much closer to natural language. I'm not searching for a specific term. I'm searching for a concept, an idea. I'm expressing that. I'm either using audio voice search, or I'm using typing in something that is more complicated. I'm searching for a concept. I'm searching for something that I not really know exactly what I'm looking for. Hey, what you have about the red planet? I'm not asking about Mars, but as you can see, a lot of the content is actually about Mars. Furthermore, we actually have what we call the hybrid search, where you can actually weight the importance of term-based results versus semantic meaning. What if we are actually searching for the keyword red planet? So term would be completely important versus semantic. So we actually recommend using hybrid, where there's a mix of importance given to the search term you're using, but also the meaning behind it. So this semantic search is great, for example, at doing something like show me movies about culture. So you no longer have to wait to be worried about translations or terms that are different, sci-fi versus science fiction. In this case, I'm actually searching in different languages, and I'm going back to the concept of soccer, culture in Italian, and I'm actually seeing results that are being provided back to the user. Right now, I was in the middle, so if I move to completely semantic, I can see that any content that is specifically about culture, not something that contains the word culture, actually shows up. And we can see, for example, Maradona, Pelé, game stencil, all content that is about soccer itself. But there's actually no culture in the metadata itself. So semantic search is also capable of understanding different languages and translating those items into the actual meaning of the query itself. This will be all for today, and I'll thank you so much for your attention. Going back to the 4 levels, let me just briefly summarize. Single list, traditional recommendation engine point of view. Multiple list, the ability to build dynamic collections that change user by user. Page personalization, the ability to rearrange and reorder objects in the page like collections. And the presentation layer, the ability to display information in a different way according to the user behavior, consumption, preferences, and so on. Thank you for everything. I will see you next time.